Welcome everyone to Ask the Priest. Today is the 27th of July, the eve of St. Vladimir, and we just finished vigil outside, and thank God for that. We had a nice choir, some of whom were in earshot as I'm saying that, so we want them to know that we appreciate them. We want you to know that we appreciate them also. My name is Father Gregory Joyce, and I'm the rector here at St. Vladimir Church, and I'm the Dean of the Pastoral School of the Diocese of Chicago and Mid-America, and let's start with a prayer like we always do. O heavenly King, Comforter, Spirit of Truth, who art everywhere present and fillest all things, treasury of good things and giver of life, come and dwell in us and cleanse us of all impurity and save our souls. O good one. All right, good. So we're happy to have you with us. We missed a couple of weeks, unfortunately, but we're thankful to be able to be back. This is a program that we sort of reinvigorated when we began our quarantine, and of course the quarantine is less now, although there's a lot of talk about we might have to go back to lockdown again. We'll see what happens. We had a talk about that yesterday at Parish Council meeting, and we do have a plan, so do not fear. If for some reason we have to regress, we're ready for that, and we'll be ready to serve the people as best as we can, given whatever situation it is that we're put into. The Lord must be giving us this for some reason. It must be good for our salvation. There must be some salvation there, and therefore we're going to do the best that we can, given the limitations that we're put under. All right, this week, it's not a fasting week, right? Peter and Paul fast ended on the feast of St. Peter and Paul. We have a Wednesday, Friday fast, and both of those happen to be relatively strict fast days with no fish or wine or oil. Kind of interesting during this time. You don't have too many of those stricter days, but we do this week. This is a busy week at St. Vladimir's, and it's also a busy week in the deanery. We have our feast day tomorrow, our second Pascha. We're very excited about that. We don't have a bishop with us, and that's unfortunate, but the fact of the matter is that based on the limitations that we have inside, essentially we only have 18 spots that are safely spaced apart from each other. And that means we could put at max 36 people if we had 18 families of 2 plus a choir. It's just not practical for the feast day. And so we'll be outside. We were outside tonight for the vigil. We'll be outside tomorrow for the Divine Liturgy. But you just never know what you're going to get when it's outside. It could be 95 degrees. I don't think it's going to be. But, when we're making the plan whether to ask the bishop to come or not, we didn't know, and so I talked with the bishop, and he thought, you're right, this isn't the time to do that. And when the quarantine's over, the bishop will visit again, and we're looking forward to that, because those hierarchical visits are really important. I mean, as a priest for, I don't know how long I've been a priest, long enough to not remember how long I've been a priest, I can tell you that the hierarchical visits are crucial. They're really, really important to a parish family, but there's nothing we can do about it in this kind of a unique situation, and so it is what it is. And we'll have some of the priests from the deanery join us and some of the deacons, and I think it'll be nice. We'll be serving under tents like we usually do on Sunday mornings, and also we have a separate tent where we'll have a meal afterwards, and so we hope that everybody can join us. Who's able, who's comfortable going out. It's really nice to be able to get together. It's outside, it's different, but we have everything amplified, so you can hear pretty well actually when you're there. So anyway, please join us, and if for some reason you can't, you can join us here on Facebook. We'll be broadcasting live the Divine Liturgy beginning at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. 9 o'clock, Divine Liturgy, so please join us then. All right, so we talked a little bit about the fasting for this week. How about the service schedule for this week? Well, we start tonight, Monday night. We have vigil for St. Vladimir, and then tomorrow morning, Divine Liturgy at 9 o'clock, followed by a cross procession. We'll bless the water at 8. We'll have the hours at 8:30, so on and so forth. But Divine Liturgy begins at 9. Then after that, we'll do the cross procession with the blessing, using the blessed water to bless the church and the grounds. And that's always something really wonderful and marvelous, and we hope that you can join us, as I said, for that. Then on Wednesday evening, we have Vespers and Matins for the great martyr Marina. Also, margaritas are named for the same saint. It's kind of interesting that you have Marina and Margarita. It's the same saint in any case. We have that, and then on Saturday morning in Lansing, we'll be celebrating the second feast day of the St. Seraphim Parish there. There's the one in January, and there's this one on the 1st of August, according to the new calendar. And we'll be there for that. So thank God we have a nice, robust service schedule here at St. Vladimir's and in the Michigan Deanery this week. And that's not counting all the other parishes who are serving as well, and thank God for all of them as well. So we haven't been able to get the priests together either from the Deanery during this time of quarantine or semi-quarantine, and we're looking forward very much to being able to do that sometime soon. Okay, so a little bit of news from St. Vladimir's. Our founder, Olga Fyodorowna Radulovich, celebrated her 95th anniversary on the feast of St. Olga. In that generation, a lot of people were named for the saint on the day that they were born, which is kind of interesting because several generations before that, and previously for several centuries, it was the practice to name the child for the saint 8 days after they were born. When the priest would come and give the name to the child, he'd open up the calendar, and if it was a male child, the first male saint, that was the name that the child would get. If it was a female, well, the first female saint, that is the name she'd get. And that provided for a real great diversity of names in the Russian Church, which is kind of neat. Not everybody was Maria or John at that time. There was this huge diversity of names, and then that's fine. There isn't such a diversity now, and that's okay. But in any case, that generation, it for some reason was the practice. My grandfather's same age. I mean, he's passed on. Same age as Olga. Same thing. He was born on the feast of St. Peter and Paul, and he was Paul. So we had that happen. That was really great, and that was a really nice time. We had a young person who came to the church on that day also after Divine Liturgy was joined to the church through chrismation with Archbishop Peter's blessing, and that was super. And so it was nice. And we had for the first time, we've been having about 85 people on Sunday mornings, and we had for the first time 50 communicants, which, I mean, it doesn't seem like much based on what it was before the pandemic, but since the quarantine began, that was the first time that we had 50, and I assume, God willing, we'll have that, if not more, tomorrow. But that was a nice sort of milestone to reach as well. So thank God for all of that. All right. Oh, don't forget that we have Liturgy Classes that are happening each week on Tuesday and Wednesday evening on Google Meet. You can find the link in the email that we send out every Monday. And if you don't get that email, then please send me a note or post something in the comments section here, and we'll be very happy to add your email to our email list. We're recording those because you can do that on Google, which is kind of neat. We're recording those and we're posting those on our YouTube channel, so you can find those classes there as well. The Tuesday evening ones are in Russian, and the Wednesday evening ones are in English. This week, that Wednesday one will actually be on Thursday. So anyway, have a look at the email, and if you don't get that, please let me know, and I'll be happy to add you to our list. Okay, so that's what's happening at St. Vladimir's recently. And as I said, we have a busy week this week, and thank God for that. Now, if you'd like to ask a question, because this show is called Ask the Priest, please type a question in the comments section, and we'll be very happy to answer it during the show, or maybe afterwards, or maybe it'll be such a good question if you're answering or seeing this show after it's broadcast, not live, but you're seeing it recorded. You can still ask a question, and we may sort of reserve that and have that for the next show. We're going to take a couple of weeks off because I'm going to be up in the northern wilds of Upper Michigan. That's where Higher Deacon Alexei, who's watching, is located, and there's a lot of bears there and lions and Sasquatch and things like that. And so we can't be distracted and have Ask the Priest when all those creatures are roaming around. So we always look forward to our couple of weeks up there, but we'll take a break from Ask the Priest for a couple of weeks too and pick it up when we get back, probably on the 17th of August, but more to come on that. All right, so ask your question in the comment section. A couple of people sent in questions ahead of time, and we'll get to those right now. But in the meantime, you can ask questions now, or like I said, if you see this when it's recorded, you can do it then. All right, the question is, why do deacons and altar servers kiss the priest's hand when handing him or receiving from him a censer? So the reason that we ever kiss the priest's right hand, and we don't ever kiss his left hand, but the reason that we would kiss his right hand is because the priest is able, through his ordination, through the spiritual reality of what he is as a priest who serves in the church, he's able to consecrate the bread and wine into the body and blood of Christ, and he does that with his right hand. And he has this kind of single portion of grace that he receives from the bishop that ordains him, and he can use that to serve the Divine Liturgy. And so when we give or take something from a priest, liturgically, like Also, you'll see when the deacon hands me a candle, well, any priest, a candle like at the Polyaleos or something, and he'll kiss my hand also. But it's not the Father Gregory that's important here. It's the fact that I'm a priest, right? And so kissing the priest's right hand when you're liturgically giving him something is normal. And with the bishop, you do the same. But bishop has a double portion of grace. When the priest blesses, he blesses like this, right, with one hand. But the bishop blesses with two hands because he has a double portion of grace. So you could kiss the bishop's left hand, I suppose, if for some reason you did that. He could sense, I suppose, with his left hand if he wanted to do that. So in any case, when it's a priest or a bishop, you'll see during the service, certain things are handed to him. The deacon or the altar server may kiss his right hand because of his order, because of his rank as a priest. Not rank, rank's not the right word. San. How would you say that in English? The reality of the fact that he's a priest of God and that he has the ability, because of the grace that was imparted to him at ordination, to consecrate the bread and wine into the body and blood of Christ. So I hope that answers. Priest, bishop, same thing. Okay, now, I just asked your question. I'm on live, so. I just answered it, so you have to watch it at home. Another question that we received was, at church, men have to take their hats off and women have to cover their heads. That is what St. Paul is in his epistle. Why is it so? Why the hierarchy being men do have heads covered, like mitres and others. Okay, so there's a context to what's happening here in Corinthians. There's a context to every single epistle, right? It wasn't just St. Paul writing to the Corinthians saying, how you doing, I miss you, and so on and so forth. He's giving instructions. Why is he giving instructions? Because something motivated him to give instructions? No, because there's a problem. There's a problem. Same reason why we have councils in the church. If there's a problem, it's not that the bishops just haven't seen each other for a while and want to have a council. No, when there's a problem in the church. And that problem has to be addressed. Right? So St. Paul is addressing problems. So there must have been a problem in Corinth with what was happening there. We don't know every single detail of this, but so it's interesting because sometimes the Old Testament practices, customs, kind of carried through into the New Testament church. The law of Moses was, I don't want to say banned, but it just, at the first council, at the Apostolic Council, they decided that Christians don't have to follow the law of Moses. But some of the customs carried through, like the idea that a believer is not someone who's clean shaven and who's got short hair, right? That's what the way the pagans would groom themselves, especially the Roman pagans. And so the Christians kind of continued that practice. It was very common for men to wear beards, maybe not to cut their hair short anyway. And that was true in the beginning of the Christian time, and it kind of has carried through. I mean, there's no sin against shaving or cutting your hair, but that custom had a influence on the early New Testament church, and it kind of even carries through a little bit today. So it's interesting, though, because some customs had influence and others did not. For instance, in Judaism, men do cover their heads when they pray, right? I mean, take a look at what's happening there. Men cover their heads when they pray, but St. Paul instructs the Corinthians not to do that. Why? Maybe there was a problem with that. Like, first of all, maybe it was needed that there was a distinction between the Old Testament and the New Testament in this regard. Maybe that was important. And the apostles, through the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, instructed that there be a distinction. So it was clear that Christian men do not cover their heads when they pray, and that whereas Jewish men do. Or perhaps there is a problem overall with men just having some kind of competition or fancy head coverings or something like that, and it was just causing a big temptation, and St. Paul said, just forget it. Forget it and just stop all of that. Because this is something interesting if you read the epistles, which is recommended, of course. At first, it used to be that there was a meal and then there was communion, right? I mean, that was almost always the way that it was done with the Lord, right? There was a meal and then there was communion. And that was the way that it started in the early New Testament church too. But even during the time of the apostles, it already started to become where these meals were like out of control and people were getting drunk, and it was not the right tenor. And so they changed it and made it so that first is communion and then a meal, right? And so whenever there's a problem, an epistle is sent or a council is held or whatever. And so St. Paul was addressing some issue there, right? And so if you read that Corinthians letter in the 11th chapter, he's talking about how women should be in church and how men should be in church. And he was certainly addressing an issue, a problem that was there. And so that maybe was specific to the Corinthian church at one point, but it became kind of the rule for everyone, where women essentially cover their heads when they're in church and men do not. Now the clergy do have this sort of series of ecclesiastical awards that they're given, some of which includes head coverings. Also monastics cover their heads when they're in church. And that has to do with their tonsure and their sort of humility. Head covering often has to do with humility, right? For the clergy, that series of, although it's interesting because only we do this abroad now, the priest is given a colored skufia as an award. That doesn't exist in Russia anymore. That sort of died after the revolution during the Soviet time. And there's a kamilavka, and eventually you could wear a mitre, which is a bishop's, essentially what the bishop wears, although his has a cross on top and the priest one's won't. And again, we see this sort of carry over into the New Testament from the Old Testament, and those are similar, to what was worn in the temple. So anyway, I think it's very interesting that some things kind of carried over and had more force. Some customs, practices had more force, and others just didn't at all. And probably the more it was like the law of Moses, the less force it carried with it, because the apostles had already said, we don't do the law of Moses anymore. That's not for Christians. And so that's probably how it worked. But some of these things, like we see a little bit, but we don't know every single thing about it. And that's okay. As Orthodox Christians, we're okay with that. Some mystery is fine. There's nothing wrong with it. And in fact, it's part of our lives that we have some mystery in our lives. And that's okay. We're not seeking, mystery. It's just perfectly fine to know stuff. We're not, seeking to be in the dark or anything like that. But as Orthodox Christians, we don't need to understand how many angels can dance on the head of a pin. It doesn't matter to us, right? That's just not something that matters. There are things that matters. There are things that matter. Those things that matter are given to us. We know them, and they're important for our salvation. And the things that aren't so much, we don't know all of those things. So that's perfectly okay. There's Deacon Colin. You can say hello. He's there. All right, so somebody sent in a question. This is long enough. Okay. If you're speaking of head coverings for men, can you explain the head coverings for women, history or reason behind it? Okay. I think that the question just popped up after I had just had that conversation. So hopefully that answers it. If not, please prompt again, and I'll be very happy to answer that question. Also, my wife asked a question today, which probably wasn't for Ask the Priest, but I'll give it anyway. Why do we wear red for St. Vladimir's? And probably most people are saying, we don't wear red for St. Vladimir, we wear gold. But apparently it was the practice in Kiev before the revolution to wear red. And so when Archbishop Peter was appointed to this diocese, he instructed us that we should wear red on the feast of St. Vladimir, and so we do. So, the easy answer is because the bishop said so, but there is actually a reason behind it, and that is that apparently that was the practice in Kiev to wear red for St. Vladimir before the revolution. Now there's a real diverse color scheme just within the Russian church. According to the Typicon, there's only two colors, light and dark. That's why in some local churches, like the Serbian church or the Greek church, you can have a service, every single clergyman's in a different color, but it's all light. Or a different color, it's all dark, depending on what's called for. But in the Russian church, we have a much more complex color scheme. And even there's some variation, even within the Russian church now. I mean, there was a lot of variation in the Russian church before the revolution, because not everybody could look on the TV and copy what Moscow was doing on TV, right? But now you can do that, and so practices like wearing red for Pascha or something like that, which was always only limited to Moscow and mostly to the court, to the Mission Cathedral, it becomes a very widespread practice. Whereas that was just unheard of before the revolution, right? And there were all kinds of other diverse color practices within the Russian church. Not random, there were reasons for these things. What I find interesting is, like even today, during Lenten periods, abroad we wear red or purple for the Sundays. But in Russia, they often wear gold. So just interesting, these little differences, especially for the Apostles' fast and the Nativity fast. In the immigration in China, at least in Harbin, may not have been everywhere, but in Harbin on Ancestor Saturdays, Ancestor Saturdays, they wear brown. Isn't that interesting? Brown. So anyway, there are various practices, and like I said, it's not just up to the priest to randomly choose whatever he wants to do. There's got to be a rationale, and generally the bishops kind of make this call at this point. Yeah, that's fine. So that at least in the diocese, there's a standard practice. But yeah, we wear red for St. Vladimir's, and that's because they did that in Kiev before the revolution. All right, good. So thank you, people, for asking questions. Thank you for signing in. Thank you for letting us know where you're watching us from. We see that James is with us from Freeland, and I saw Luba from Chicago, and people from all over our diocese in the Michigan Deanery, and that's great. No other questions? We just had vigil. I got to get up really early tomorrow to bless water and prepare the gifts for the Divine Liturgy, so I think we're going to say good night. We'll be off for a couple of weeks, as I said, and then back on August 17th. So please mark that on your calendars, and that 17th should be at the usual 8 o'clock time, I think. But anyway, keep an eye on our Facebook page, and we'll confirm that as we come closer. All right, so let's pray, and then we will say good night. It is truly meet to bless thee, the Theotokos, ever blessed and most blameless and mother of our God, more honorable than the cherubim and beyond compare more glorious than the seraphim, who without corruption gave us birth to God, the Word, the very Theotokos. Thee do we magnify. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate you joining us. We ask your prayers.